Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video contains my initial impressions on the new shared skill system coming to the game as part of the next version update. There are still lots of unknowns with the system, so please keep that in mind when watching. I mainly wanted to make this video just because I enjoy speculating and theory crafting, and I'm really excited about what this new system could bring to Dragalia Lost. Let me briefly mention what we know about shared skills so far. The shared skills system allows the lead unit on your team to equip and use up to 2 skills from other adventurers in your collection. Skills can only be borrowed from adventurers in your collection who've reached at least level 80 and have at least 50 mana nodes unlocked. Additionally, not all skills can be shared via the system, and there's a material cost to unlock skill sharing. To make a skill shareable, you must spend elemental tomes, which will come from events and the shop. Adventurers who join in the main campaign are exceptions to these rules. There are 2 slots to equip shared skills, and each shared skill has its own skill point cost. Skill point costs vary across skills, and skill point caps or limits vary across adventurers. The combined cost of the first and second shared skills must be less than or equal to the adventurer's cost limit. The first shared skill slots can be occupied by either a weapon skill or a shared skill, and the second slot can be filled with either a helper skill or a shared skill, but helpers will presumably remain locked to solo play, while shared skills can be used in either solo or co-op. All of the shareable skills we've seen so far are primary skills, meaning it appears as though only an adventurer's first skill can be shared. We also know that adventurers can't share their own skill onto themselves, and that the level of the shared skills will match the equivalent skill level for the adventurer who equips it. The last detail is a bit hard to parse, but I've seen it interpreted to mean that you can't put level 4 skills from mana spiraled characters onto characters who haven't unlocked their mana spiral yet. It would also potentially mean that a level 3 skill put onto a mana spiraled character could be scaled up to level 4. Some of the common misconceptions I've seen are that skill sharing is restricted by element or weapon type, but this does not seem to be the case. Another point of confusion relates to the Dragalia Digest. Back then, it was stated that shared skills would come from other team members. Instead, it looks like the final implementation lets you use any applicable adventurer in your entire collection, meaning the unit whose skill you want to share onto your leader doesn't need to be on your team in order to do so. There's also some talk that skill point costs might increase with the level of the skill, or that skill share won't work in co-op, but I don't think there's anything to confirm either of those, especially the latter. Instead, it looks to me like shared skills are a huge overhaul to all forms of play in Dragalia Lost, whether that's solo, auto, or co-op play. It's hard to overstate how much of a game changer it is that lead units can now equip up to 4 skills, especially for co-op, since a team of 4 human players has 4 leaders. This change is on the same level as moving from a single worm print system to a double print system back in the day, or perhaps even more profound than that, and I'm pumped for the new possibilities. I expect future content will be balanced around this change, including the upcoming Master Volk's Wrath. Now, there's bound to be some fears over such a big update, so I want to take some time to address those before stating why I'm still looking forward to this change so much. One concern is that this makes the game less accessible to new players because it is yet another system on top of an already complex game. I think this is valid, but counterbalanced by the fact that this system will make existing content easier to clear. A second concern is that this will widen the gap between free-to-play and spending players. I also think this is legitimate. The good news is that campaign characters have some excellent skills, as we'll discuss, but the bad news is being able to buy tomes from the shop and needing lots of Eldwater and Champion's Testaments to 50 node units will give whales faster progression. My perspective on this is that, just like Chainco abilities, this is something the game needs to keep going from a monetization standpoint. I don't necessarily love it, but it does give me fond memories of my early months as a free-to-play player. If you're still in that group, it may be kind of fun picking and choosing who to invest in, just like the old days when materials like Twinkling Sand were scarce. It's not perfect, but I'm not too upset about this issue. issue. A third concern is that this update will break the game's balance or lead to toxic changes in its meta, like gatekeeping based on shared skills or a lot less diversity of characters and skills used in public lobbies. This is probably the most up in the air, but I'm willing to give Dragalia the benefit of the doubt. The fact that the notice for the shared skills update explicitly mentions certain skills will be disallowed makes me think that this system has been vetted and tested. And in the worst case, I've been pretty pleased with the devs' efforts to open up previously stale content like High Jupiter's Trial back when it was all Gala Clio. So it's too soon to say, but I'm hopeful here. There are also lots of balancing knobs to turn besides just outright banning certain skills, like the skill points costs and the skill points caps across adventurers. The final concern I've seen is about what this means for support units like healers and buff bots. This is where I'm maybe not quite as optimistic. The game has been moving away from healers for a while now as more content is easily cleared or more quickly cleared without them. Skill sharing is odd because on one hand, it means that healers might technically get used for sharing purposes, but it seems like we probably won't see them used in battle as often. Buff bots are in a similar position. The possible saving grace here is that healers and buff bots can also borrow offensive skills now, and that could be good if, say, healers and buff bots are given higher skill point limits than other types of units. They might also be used depending on how quickly each of the upcoming new weapon combos fills skill gauges. Historically, staff units have had good SP generation, and their increased attack speed after the update may mean they're quite good with an attack or utility skill slapped on, especially someone like Heinwald or Orion, for example. I think the jury is still out on this issue, and it'll come down to just what skill point costs and caps are like. So with those concerns aside, now let me say why I'm still excited for skill sharing. Building teams and adventurers is one of my favorite activities in Dragalia Lost, and skill sharing seems right up my alley for that reason. Lately, I felt that there's so much information about the game that builds have become relatively homogenous. People start to focus in on optimal worm prints, optimal dragons, and so on. But sometimes it's fun to try break the game with an unusual strategy or build and see if it actually works. The co-ability co-op change and chain co-abilities were a step toward more variety in team comps, but I think skill sharing is on another order of magnitude, particularly if we're not able to quickly gather tomes. In that case, I think we'll see more players experimenting and using what they happen to have unlocked. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone comes up with. At the time of recording, we don't know exact skill point costs or limits yet, and that'll be a major factor in determining how everything will pan out. From the screenshot shared in the version update notice, we saw a 4-star Uden with a skill points cap of 10, and skill point costs of 3 for Ronzel, 3 for Cleo, 6 for Ellie, and 5 for Luca. Many other adventurers can also be seen, including Verica with a point cost of 5. This image is also why it seems only primary skills can be shared, since no secondary skills were shown. It also hints that buff skills will come at a premium price point as far as the amount of skill points they cost. So I guess that's enough background on the version update. Time to dive deep on Theorycrafting. Let me start with some of the big picture changes I think will come with the fact that adventurers can use 4 skills. First of all, skill-related abilities will go up in value a ton. Skill damage has always been good, but skill prep, force charge, and skill charge now affect more skills than before, enabling some very explosive sequences. The Easter Bunny Dragon, Gaibne, and Krydne now looks like a huge winner from this change because its aura refills each skill by 35% after use. Dragons like Freya and Ariel with large skill haste numbers also look like they'll get even better. And Mars seems truly disgusting when refilling 4 skills after Shapeshift ends. So does Marth. Every last boost activation will be all the more devastating. Even minor ways to hasten skill gain, like buffs from Silas or Lara Noah, seems like they'll benefit in the post-skill share world. The thing to remember here is that these aren't janky weapon skills you're charging up and using. You decide what skills you brought via sharing, meaning these could easily have the high damage payload of a good primary skill, or the utility of a buff or heal. Weapon skills are usually not very good, nowhere near as good as adventurer skills, with a notable exception being Shadow Agito weapons and, to a lesser extent, Wind Agito weapons. Shadow units may prefer to keep their Agito skill and run only 1 shared skill, and Wind is more on the fence, probably leaning toward wanting 2 shared skills. This will come down to how much skills cost, since it seems like weapon skills don't count against your cap. If you can't afford 2 really good good shared skills, it may be better to take a solid weapon skill and one great shared skill. The water and light elements as a whole will become significantly stronger since a large factor holding them back right now is the lack of Agito weapons. Tier 2 High Dragon weapon stats aren't all that far off from Tier 1 Agito stats, but the trade-off between a usually bad weapon skill and a static Agito buff is big. After this update, Water and Light can forego their weapon skills for something that's actually useful. And Flame is too much of a mystery to comment on because Tier 2 Agito weapons may have lucrative skills. Once Water and Light get Agito weapons, I hope there's a fun decision to be made just like with Wind, where it's close enough that it's not necessarily obvious what you'd want to do. It's also just a little hard to envision what it will feel like to juggle the cooldown of 4 skills and how much casting skills will eat into your attacking uptime to build SP. So that does make me think Agito will still have a role to play. After all, it is convenient to just fire off the static Agito buffs while you focus on casting your other skills. Besides those big picture changes, I also suspect many people will try bringing buffing skills onto their DPS units. I have the feeling that people are looking at Ellie, Noelle, Chitose, and Emma here, but I gotta say I'm personally a bit skeptical that these units will be a good choice. Certainly Ellie is a great pick, since she's unlocked for free and won't cost any tomes, so there's no drawback to using her. But I think she's good enough in this role that spending tomes on the element-specific buff bots may not be worth it. Another reason for my skepticism is that strength buffs cap at 10 total, or 200%, whichever is hit first. If everyone on a co-op team is sharing from Ellie, you'll probably rapidly hit the cap of 10 strength buffs, especially if you have other sources of buffs like an Agito weapon, Dragon's Claws, or Resilient Offense. Since it will now be so easy to cap out on buffs, the amount on each buff may start to matter more. I think this will make chunkier buff skills like those of Tobias and Gala Ellie slightly better. I also think it creates wiggle room for buffs to other brackets like Dragonule Xainfried's buff to Wind critical rate. It helps that Tobias, Gala Ellie, and Dragonule Xainfried have nice co-abilities or chain co-abilities, meaning these are adventures you might want to take to 50 nodes anyway. Buff zone characters like Gala Yuden are also worth the look for the DPS gains they could possibly bring to all 16 adventurers in raid battles. Of course, the queen of buff bots may end up being Patia. If her skill can be shared at a cost where many adventurers can utilize it, she could very easily obsolete every other buff bot. The fact that you still get strength but also get defense all in one skill is very strong. In co-op with 4 other units who've shared skills from Patia, you could easily sit at 100% or more defense, and that might just be too good for cheesing content. Just like some people think Grace might not be allowed to share her skill, perhaps Patia might be restricted from skill sharing for similar reasons. It'd just be too hard to die. The other types of skills I could see not being shareable are those which relate to unique mechanics like skill chains, stances, or dragon drive. These are allowed for helper units though, so anything is possible. Mega Man is an especially odd case since his helper skill has different properties like using skill damage. If you really want to buff defense and Patia isn't allowed, Templar Hope is a fine alternative since he has the lowest SP cost for a 25% defense buff. This could still be used to good effect with double buff comps. And if you need some help getting to low HP but can't use Grace, Veronica or Durant may be worth a look. Durant reducing the user's defense while giving the user a sizable strength buff could make it so you take more damage from opening blast, helpful for crisis characters like Fjorm or Marth. Veronica reduces HP slightly, but the main draw to using her skill is that it deals some of the highest damage in the game. It's also worth pointing out that when I'm talking about Patia and Veronica here, I'm referring to their level 4 skills, which it sounds like wouldn't be available on adventurers who lack a mana spiral. What I'm more excited about than buffs though are debuffs. Debuff stacking is really strong in Dragalia, and defense debuffs cap at 50%, at which point you'll be dealing double damage to the target. Due to how debuffs scale with stacking and how likely I think it is that people will go overboard with buffs, I think debuffs may actually be even better to increase DPS. Halloween Mim and Valentine's Melody stand out since both have damage dealing skills that create a 15% defense debuff zone, which lasts 10 seconds. Neither has a mana spiral either, making their skills accessible to share to all characters. Similarly, Dragonule Malura can debuff shadow enemies' defense by 15% for 15 seconds. Her debuff can't stack when used twice by one unit, but it does stack with other instances from co-op. Sadly, all 3 of these units are seasonal. Thankfully, the king of debuffs is in the permanent pool. I'm low-key eyeing Delphi as quite possibly one of the biggest winners from this version update as a whole. As an adventurer whose main skills charge passively over time, he can utilize dodge rolls for iframes better than most without hurting uptime, but relevant to this video, his skill is also absurd to share, especially onto units with skill charge. Delphi's level 4 skill creates a 20% defense debuff zone for 10 seconds, and it charges naturally over time in 12 seconds. The pre-Mana Spiral level 3 version only makes a 15% debuff zone, so it's by no means bad either. Where this gets truly nutty though is when shared to, say, a water unit with Gaibne and Kreidne. All of a sudden, that unit restores 35% of Delphi's skill's SP on cast, meaning it now only takes 8 seconds to recharge instead of 12. That means he can potentially overlap his own debuff zone for a 40% defense down. On units like Mana Spiraled Fjorm, who have a built-in 5% skill charge, Delphi's skill would only take 7.5 seconds to ready up for use after every activation with a Gaibne and Kreidne setup. Even though you won't be able to use his poison since that's tied to his abilities, Delphi still seems nuts. If survival becomes more of a priority than sheer DPS, I think some of the best units besides the aforementioned Patya and Grace are regen healers like Summer Verica, Akasha, Vixel, Nurse Eileen, and Halloween Lowen. Verica and Valentine's Hildegard also seem fine for those who are missing Lowen and may even be preferred depending on the situation. Estelle, Wedding Elisanne, Sonoa, and Cassandra also catch my eye as adventurers with rare skills that could help with a mix of survival and utility. Estelle heals the lowest HP player pretty much to full. Wedding Elisanne deals respectable damage for low SP cost while making a regen buff zone. Sonoa may be good if you want some max HP buffs, but don't mind the randomness while you collect them. And Cassandra is special in that her first skill is the only one to have a guaranteed max HP buff after Mana Spiral. That skill also causes poison as an added bonus. And speaking of poison, enabling Affliction Punishers using skill share seems like another good strategy. If Ronzel really only costs 3 skill points, including his Mana Spiral version, he may very well be the best skill share unit due to just how much damage and versatility his first skill provides. Not only is his damage modifier over 2000%, which is excellent, but he also dispels enemy buffs and causes poison. The only other source of dispel via skill sharing is Naveed, whose dispel is also locked to a Mana Spiral. However, Naveed's damage modifier is only around 800%, making it worse than Ronzel's even against flame or wind enemies. But hey, on the bright side for Naveed fans, Nobunaga's skill looks fun on him. Silas looks like another fantastic poisoner since he has a big 30% strength debuff on his first skill and a relatively low SP cost. The one thing you'll want to be careful of when using too many affliction skills from sharing is that bosses build up resistance the more and more they get afflicted. If a lot of players try to take affliction-inducing shared skills into co-op lobbies, it may not end well. That being said, some afflictions can change a fight even with a single use like freeze, stun, and sleep. At a glance, I think Linyu is the best enabler for sleep if you can access her Mana Spiraled skill because she has a 150% chance to cause it. Dragalia Cleo looks like one of the best sources for freeze since she has a nice co-ability and chain combination, making her a good investment, plus her first skill has lots of other side effects like buffs and is multi-hit. And Annalie looks like the best source for stun due to the added energy, although someone like Yue might not be bad either if you prefer for the shared skill to deal flame damage rather than light damage. These afflictions could be brutal when shared for use against Volk since he's extra vulnerable due to plague. Even someone like Summer Celiera looks interesting to 50 node thanks to her Bog on her first skill and nice co-ability and chain combination. I don't think a one-time Bog will be optimal compared to the alternatives, but if there's ever a non-wind foe with a plague-like mechanic, it may be worth a look. For Paralysis, I think an adventurer like Peony might be best due to the added skill shift bonuses on her skill and the fact that she's a must-have investment anyway for light. For Frostbite, Zainfried and Fjorm seem best if the character you're sharing onto has a Mana Spiral. Otherwise, Lazari, Mitsuba, and Valerio all seem solid if you can actually share skills from them since they're stance characters. If not, Gald may be the best Frostbite enabler for units who can't access a Mana Spiral just yet. Frostbite does last 21 seconds though, so even more than other damage over time afflictions, it's not worth spamming. For burn, I see Marth or Yuden as the best enablers if you can access their spiraled skills. Marth has some nice built-in regen in his multi-hit attack, and Yuden builds up the dragon gauge by 3%. If you can't use mana spiraled skills, then I think Reyna is the best source of burn due to her 120% proc chance and relatively high damage. And for units who can't use Yuden due to his mana spiral, or if they just don't want to cap out burn too fast, Gala Mim is also interesting since she boosts the dragon gauge by 5%. Audric, likewise, might be worth a look for this reason, although he only fills the gauge by 3%. They're just a few options that could be cool on dragon-centric characters. There's a few other random characters with interesting skills like Yuya, who deals low flame damage but gives 20% attack rate for 10 seconds. But I think we've gone on long enough for today. There's just so much to this update that I could go on and on talking about the possibilities. I didn't even talk about which characters might be the best recipients of skills due to their inherent passive abilities. But with skill sharing just a week away, perhaps it's best to just wait and see what actually unfolds. Anyway, I'm very curious to hear what you all think. What adventures do you want to share skills from, and who do you want to share skills onto? Y'all already know that if the shared skill does a cut-in of the original character like helper skills currently work, I'm gonna have to share from Eleanor and Pietro, just so they can make more cameos in battle. I'm also excited about theming the Skillshare sources like putting Renee and Reyna onto Ramona, for example, just because of the awesome flavor. But that is really going to do it for today, everyone. So, thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.